outside my window.
Hello, and welcome to The Bard's Truth with your host, the Green Bard. This is Lemongate 3, 4 Loyal Men, the Tower of Joy. In episode 1, we made the case that George R. R. Martin definitely wrote Lemongate into A Song of Ice and Fire, and in episode 2, we discussed the likely reason for Dany and Viserys being ejected from the house with the red door, concluding that it was more likely due to sabotage by Illyrio, Mopatis, and Varys, blocking Dorne from building an alliance with Tyrosh around Dany and Viserys, in preference to their own conspiracy to install Aegon onto the Iron Throne. This time, we will focus on how they got to the house with the red door, and who were these 4 loyal men. And don't forget the wet nurse, who accompanied Dany, Viserys, and Willem Darry there. I'll say it here, it was the Kingsguard from the Tower of Joy, or at least some permutation of them. Before you click away, I'd ask you to suspend your disbelief and allow me to present the case. I can't prove this, of course, but I'd like the chance to give you some food for thought. Let's start to make the case with the passage from Dany's POV. She had been born on Dragonstone 9 moons after their flight, while a raging summer storm threatened to rip the island fastness apart. They said the storm was terrible. The Targaryen fleet was smashed while it lay at anchor, and huge stone blocks were ripped from the parapets and sent hurtling into the wild waters of the narrow sea. Her mother had died birthing her, and for that her brother Viserys had never forgiven her. She did not remember Dragonstone either. They had run again, just before the usurper's brother set sail with his new-built fleet. By then, only Dragonstone itself, the ancient seat of their house, had remained of the 7 kingdoms that had once been theirs. It would not remain for long. The garrison had been prepared to sell them to the usurper, but one night Sir Willem Darry and 4 loyal men had broken into the nursery and stolen them both, along with her wet nurse, and set sail under cover of darkness for the safety of the Bravosian coast. Now, Preston has made a great case that this storm was rather Stannis storming the castle. That is a much better explanation for why the garrison was willing to sell them out. I'll add to the tableau. The huge stone blocks that were ripped from the parapets and sent hurtling into the wild waters of the narrow sea were flung by defensive catapults aimed at Stannis' fleet, not blocks torn from the castle by wind and rain or thunder and lightning. And Stannis' recollection reinforces that idea. I built a fleet at Robert's command, took Dragonstone in his name. Did he take my hand and say, "Well done, brother, whatever should I do without you?" No, he blamed me for letting Willem Darry steal away Viserys and the babe, as if I could have stopped it. Certainly he had to take it by force, not by treachery. Now, I'll turn the focus to Willem Darry, because the Kingsguard also speak of him with Ned, per his fever dream. I find it a very intriguing connection. Sir Willem Darry is fled to Dragonstone with your queen and Prince Viserys. I thought you might have sailed with him. Sir Willem Darry is a good man and true, said Sir Oswell. But not of the Kingsguard, Sir Gerald pointed out. The Kingsguard does not flee. Note their respect of Darry. They know he is also a loyal man, like themselves, men who were still guarding the Tower of Joy at Rhaegar's command. The Kingsguard may not flee, but we know that they rescue. Sir Barristan's valor in the defiance of Duskendale is proof enough of that. Note also that at the time of the Tower of Joy scene, Dragonstone is still in Targaryen hands. This being a fever dream means that Willem Darry is connected to these Kingsguard in the deep recesses of Ned's mind. Why would that be? I'll submit to you that it is because he conspired with them to work with Darry to rescue Dany and Viserys. For the rest of the essay, and probably beyond it, I'll try to make the case that these 3 Kingsguard may have survived the Tower of Joy to continue serving Rhaegar's cause, fulfilling the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. But wait, that's 3 loyal men. Who was the 4th? Well, perhaps Ned. I find it very interesting if he was one of the 4 loyal men after also being accused of being one of the usurper's dogs. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Before we get too far, let me give credit to A Song of Ice and Toodles, or u/mtoodles on Reddit, for introducing to me some of the analysis I'll use here. Although my style, sanity, and conclusions differ from his, I'll love Toodles. Thanks. I'll also credit Sir Stefan of the Septa Shayna Secrets channel for reinforcing my and Toodles' ideas around the fate of Sir Gerald Hightower as Quarren Halfhand. I made a playlist of Septuagina's Secrets videos and my prior analysis about Sir Gerald and Quarren Halfhand, linked here. I also believe that Sir Arthur Dayne is Mance Rayder, and Sir Oswell Went is Oswell Kettleblack. For the record, Toodles is also the one who convinced me that Oswell is Oswell. And I believe I learned about Mance Rayder being Arthur first from the Order of the Green Hand. Why do I think they survived, though? These Kingsguard are the cream of the crop in Westeros, the best of the best fighters in the realm. And while Desmond tells Arya, "Every northerner is worth 10 of these southern swords," we know that isn't true, especially in this case. They had been 7 against 3, yet only 2 had lived to ride away. Eddard Stark himself and the little Crennog man, Howland Reed. He did not think it omened well that he should dream that dream again after so many years. First of all, linguistically, the predicate they in that passage refers only to Ned's 7, not the 3 Kingsguard, leaving it open that all 3 of them survived to ride away. Given that these 3 Kingsguard presumably killed the other 5 of Ned's 7, let's investigate who they were and how realistic it is that the Kingsguard might survive such a fight. I list them here in order of increasing skill in battle. Before that, I'll also note that I think at least one more of Ned's 7 did live, although he did not ride away. He was crippled and probably carried away in a litter. We'll get back to him later. Ned 7, Howland Reed, Lord of Greywater Watch, a diminutive man. Lord Willem Dustin. All we know of him is that Lady Dustin begged him not to go to war, which is not a ringing endorsement of his skill in battle. Ethan Glover was Brandon's squire. He was probably well trained, but young and not an advanced fighter. Sir Mark Risewell was soft of speech and gentle of heart, according to Ned's dream. Theo Wool, a mountain clansman, who may have strength and skill at arms, but likely not mastery. Martin Cassell was a Stark armsman. While his son Jory seemed a decent fighter, he found no renown in the joust, and Jaime Lannister killed him. Their kinsman, Roderick Cassell, was master at arms at Winterfell. Martin was probably an accomplished fighter. And then finally Lord Eddard Stark, likely the best trained of his 7. So after Ned, we probably have 2 decent fighters there, Cassell and Wool. The other 4 are very unimpressive. They whispered of Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, deadliest of the 7 knights of Aerys' Kingsguard, and of how their young lord had slain him in single combat. The fact that Ned is thought of in such high regard by his men is a tribute to his ability. While I don't think Ned would win, let's assume he holds his own against Sir Arthur in single combat for a while. That would mean the other 2 Kingsguard would have to take on and mop the floor with 3 men each. 2 weak foes and 1 respectable. Could they win? Honestly, I find it highly likely. Let's remember how exceptional fighters like Garland Tyrell and the fledgling Jon Snow take on multiple adversaries all the time in the practice yard, successfully. The key would be not to allow the decent fighters an opening while dispatching the weak foes quickly. Jon does exactly that here. 3 on 1? Jace was incredulous. That wouldn't be fair. He was one of Conway's latest bunch, a cobbler's son from Fair Isle. Maybe that explained it. True, come here. When he did, Jon's blade slammed him alongside his head, knocking him off his feet. In the blink of an eye, the boy had a boot on his chest and a sword point at his throat. War is never fair, Jon told him. It's 2 on 1 now, and you're dead. Jon goes on to win the fight, though he takes a wound from one of the other 2 foes. The Kingsguard would have done the same, though perhaps without the wound. One probably knocked Dustin off his Grand Red Stallion, crippling him. The other simultaneously incapacitating Reed. That makes it 4 facing 2. Next, I expect they easily dispatch the Squire and the Risewell Knight, leaving Cassell and Wool. While both of them would have made a good showing of themselves, they would not last long against the best of Westeros. They were 7 facing 3, in the dream as it had been in life, yet these were no ordinary 3. They waited before the round tower, the red mountains of Dorne at their backs, their white cloaks blowing in the wind, and these were no shadows. Their faces burned clear even now. Sir Arthur Dayne, the Sword of the Morning, had a sad smile on his lips. The hilt of the great sword Dawn poked up over his right shoulder. Sir Oswell Went was on one knee, sharpening his blade with a whetstone. Across his white enameled helm, the black bat of his house spread its wings.
Between them stood fierce old Sir Gerald Hightower, the White Bull, Lord Commander of the Kingsguard.
No, it's the Kingsguard easily in this one. Ned can even remember their faces, and I posit that it's only because they still lived. He had likely seen at least two of those faces recently, Arthur Dayne's and Sir Gerald Hightower's. I imagine that Ned only survived because Howland Reed intervened with diplomacy, with his words.
The finest knight I ever saw was Sir Arthur Dayne, who fought with a blade called Dawn, forged from the heart of a fallen star. They called him the Sword of the Morning, and he would have killed me, but for Howland Reed. Father had gotten sad then, and he would say no more.
In calling him the finest knight, Ned is remembering Sir Arthur's honor and chivalry here, not his skill at arms. That is Ned's character, and I bet he chooses honorable friends too. That's why I don't think Reed used a knife to the back like in the show. I think he used the power of diplomacy. Howland probably spoke of Ned's friendship to Arthur's sister, Ashara, and mentioned that Ned was there to see his own sister, pleading for the Kingsguard to give Ned a chance to see Lyanna. The finest knight would have heard that plea.
"Promise me," she had cried in a room that smelled of blood and roses. "Promise me, Ned." The fever had taken her strength, and her voice had been faint as a whisper. But when he gave her his word, the fear had gone out of his sister's eyes. Ned remembered the way she had smiled then, how tightly her fingers had clutched his as she gave up her hold on life, the rose petals spilling from her palm, dead and black. After that he remembered nothing. They had found him, still holding her body, silent with grief. The little Crannog man, Howland Reed, had taken her hand from his. Ned could recall none of it.
Who were the they that found Ned? Was the wet nurse Wyla already there? If not, we are led to believe that Ned and Howland are the only two people there alive, save for Jon. No, I think the they now includes Howland and the three Kingsguard. In this passage, you can see Lyanna's passion. She may be fearful for her child, but I think it is also for the realm. Remember, the reason that Rhaegar noticed her in the first place, because she stood up to bullies to protect the weak. Howland Reed, who definitely did not slay Arthur. She's selfless. As I said in our last episode, Rhaegar inspired loyalty to his cause, the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, in his closest allies. And none were closer than Arthur, Elia, and Lyanna. This can be the one and only explanation for Arthur's presence here. Otherwise, he'd have been in one of the litany of places Ned lists in his preamble to the fight. And Arthur clearly trusted the other two Kingsguard with his life, else they would not have been there either. That's why I know these Kingsguard are perfect to be Dany and Viserys' 4 loyal men. They embody it. Note also that Ned was clearly in shock. He probably has many suppressed memories of this event, in an attempt to preserve his sanity and self-image as an honorable man, which would explain why we don't get more clues about the Tower of Joy conspiracy in his POVs. As we know, he paid dearly for these promises, plural, as we learned in the brothel scene before his injury and the Tower of Joy Fever Dream chapter.
"I will," Ned had promised her. That was his curse. Robert would swear undying love and forget them before evenfall, but Ned Stark kept his vows. He thought of the promises he'd made Lyanna as she lay dying, and the price he'd paid to keep them.
Lyanna, a true believer in Rhaegar's cause, would have asked Ned to protect Jon from Robert, of course, but perhaps also to help the Targaryens in the fulfillment of the Song of Ice and Fire prophecy. While we know Ned is skeptical of magic and prophecy, it's safe to say that if she extracted those promises, Ned would be of an open mind to hear the Kingsguard's thoughts on how to protect Jon, Lyanna's baby, as well as the other young Targaryens. And that is how I think the Tower of Joy leads to the flight from Dragonstone via Starfall, ending at the house with the red door. Ned's wish to protect the Targaryen children is a given, as it would be for the three Kingsguard. And this forms our third conspiracy surrounding Lemongate. These 4 loyal men conspired to protect 3 children, Viserys, Dany, and Jon, in furtherance of prophecies studied by Rhaegar Targaryen, a man admired by each of them.
For the first time in years, he found himself remembering Rhaegar Targaryen. He wondered if Rhaegar had frequented brothels. Somehow he thought not.
Ned's actions for the early part of A Game of Thrones
denying the magic of the direwolf pups, for instance, shows that he never fully bought into the A Song of Ice and Fire prophecy, or perhaps was in denial of it. He clearly did not see eye to eye with Rhaegar Targaryen, but the quote above shows that he did respect the prince. And as I said earlier, he clearly has suppressed memories due to the trauma of the events of the Tower of Joy. Not just his sister's death, but the promises she extracted, and mourning his own men. Still, Ned would be bound to protecting the 3 Targaryen children due to Lyanna's promises and his own nature. Remember, he had, only a month prior to the Tower of Joy scene, stormed out of King's Landing at the murder of Rhaegar's family, Aelia, Rhaenys, and Aegon. Is there any doubt that given the chance, Ned would put every effort into protecting Rhaegar's siblings, and not just his own blood, Jon? Doesn't this conspiracy also better explain the high regard House Dane holds for Ned? They named their frickin' heir for him.
My lady, Ned looked embarrassed. I'm Edric Dane, the Lord of Starfall.
Why grant such an honor? While we know that House Dane was part of the conspiracy to protect Jon Snow, Lord Eddard's part in that is laudable, but expected given his blood ties to Jon as his nephew.
Jon has a mother, Wyla. Her name is Wyla. She would need to remember so she could tell him the next time she saw him. She wondered if he would still call her little sister. I'm not so little anymore. He'd have to call me something else. Maybe once she got to River Run, she could write Jon a letter and tell him what Ned Dane had said. There was an Arthur Dane, she remembered, the one they called the Sword of the Morning. My father was Sir Arthur's elder brother. Lady Ashara was my aunt. I never knew her, though. She threw herself into the sea from atop the pale stone sword before I was born. Why would she do that? Said Arya, startled. Ned looked wary. Maybe he was afraid that she was going to throw something at him. Your lord father never spoke of her? He said. The Lady Ashara Dane of Starfall? No. Did he know her?
So, while they may admire him a bit for protecting Jon and returning their sword, this should be dampened by the death of Arthur and Ashara, Shirley, whose heart he apparently broke by loving and leaving her and killing her brother. But don't call her Shirley, she's Ashara. But what if Arthur and Ashara aren't actually dead, but their deaths were faked in service to the greater cause of this conspiracy? And for Ned to be part of that, to stick his neck out to protect the children of the Mad King, whom he's just deposed, that is an act worthy of enormous admiration. As an aside, why did the Kingsguard kill those other 4 or 5 Northmen? It's quite simple, secrecy. Loose lips sink ships. I'll note that I think at least one more of Ned's 7 did live, although he did not ride away. He was crippled. As I mentioned earlier, we'll get back to him soon. In the context of this conspiracy, Ned's latter apoplectic response to Robert's decision to murder 2 of these 3 children he'd sought to save 15 years earlier is crystallized. We don't need R plus L equals D or any other tinfoil parentage theories to explain Ned's protection of Dany. Ned was put on this path due to Tywin's diabolic act, and Lyanna's fervor tying Ned to Rhaegar's cause through promises.
Now the question is, how would they accomplish this? I'll begin unraveling that next episode.
In the meantime, I'll pose to you this question. How many Willums do we have in our story? Offhand, I can think of Willem Derry, Willem Dustin, and Willem Blackwood, who I discussed in my Secret History of House Blackwood video. Can you name any others?
For now, I'm out. Peace.
Thanks to all the terrific artists whose work is featured on this video. Thanks especially to all of my family who helped in this series so far.
Outside my window is a tree.
If you enjoyed this content, you can also consider supporting us on Patreon.